Hello everyone, welcome back for some more Let's Read Fate's Strange Fake as we move on to Chapter 18, as Dream and Reality are both Illusion 1, which is an interesting title. It implies that maybe the reality of Strange Fake is not what it seems, which is real curious. Let's continue on. Chapter 18, a closed-off town, Main Street. So again, we're in the fake world here. What? The first person to react to Saber's question about whether they could kill the little girl was not one of the police officers. It was Ayaka, who had been listening half disinterestedly. But if that little girl is the cause, will you be able to kill her? She understood what Saber meant. If the girl turned out to be the reason they had been pulled into this deserted world, there was a good chance that dealing with her would enable them to return to their original world. Just making it a bit bigger there. The instant that thought took shape in her head, something pulsed. Ayaka blinked slowly, steadying... something pulsed. Ayaka blinked slowly, steadying her breathing. When she quietly opened her heavy eyelids, she was there. Far across Main Street, visible through a gap in the officers. She was too far away to make out her face, but Ayaka recognized her instantly. A little girl, with her face covered by something like a simply red hood. She looked like she might be 3 years old, and seemed like she might be about 6, and Ayaka had a feeling that she was much older. Ayaka could not be sure of her height or age. Only the perception of the color red passed through Ayaka's eyes and rampaged through her brain. How could... An instant later, Red Riding Hood had drawn nearer. She had not run over. Wait, what? Oh, yeah, okay, okay. When I read run over, my brain thinks, like hit with a car, but no, literally, she did not run over. Before Ayaka knew what was happening, she was right behind the group of officers. She had only been distantly visible before, but now Ayaka could see her clearly. Red Riding Hood. The object of Ayaka's ongoing terror and one of the reasons she had come to the United States. There's no elevator, so why? Red Riding Hood was only supposed to appear inside elevators. Ayaka was not even sure if she was real or an illusion. Since her arrival in Snowfield, however, the rules began to shift. It seemed to Ayaka that she could feel Red Riding Hood's presence closer to her every time she was on the verge of remembering something in this city. Her whole body broke out in a cold sweat, but she could not look away. She could see Red Riding Hood's hood move as she slowly turned her head to face her. Oh no. No. I don't know why, but it'll be my end. If I see the face under that hood, I'll be finished. Even if she wanted to scream, her lungs were taut and she could hardly breathe. She was so paralyzed by fear that she could not even shut her eyes, let alone look away. Red Riding Hood lifted her hood even more. When it reached the point that Ayaka could see her sneering lips, Red Riding Hood vanished from her sight. Blotted out by Saber, who leaned over to look at her face. What's wrong, Ayaka? You're pale as a ghost. At the same time, Ayaka's body was freed from its paralysis. She hurriedly moved to look behind Saber, but there was no longer anything there. Oh, nothing. Just a bad daydream. You do get like that sometimes. Are you under a curse? I might be able to dispel it if you are. Thanks, but it's nothing like that, I think. Ayaka declined Saber's offer, and took another look at his face, and decided to pursue the discomfort that probably caused her to see Red Riding Hood. The discomfort and unease that had suddenly grown within her reflexively made her vocal cords squirm. More importantly, Saber, the, girl you were just talking about is the one in the coma, right? Yes, but it's apparently confirmed that she somehow became a master, so... No, that's not what I mean. Ayaka asked somewhat uneasily, reeling in the source of the discomfort that had sprouted within her. Why did you ask, will you be able to, and not, will you? Well, I don't know how to put it, but It sounded like you weren't asking whether they'd kill her or not. Sorry if I'm wrong, but it sounded more like you were saying, if you can't kill her, I will. Aika asked, choosing her words carefully. Saber felt silent for a moment, then answered with a troubled smile. Honestly, Aika, you can be quite perceptive sometimes. Saber? Wait, hang on, don't worry. I'm not trying to say that killing the girl is the right choice, and I don't want to kill her if I can avoid it. I want to save her just as much as you do. I see. Aika was somehow relieved, but as she steadily calmed herself, she asked, Then why did you ask? Aika had difficult framing her question, but Saber intuited her intent and answered, choosing his words carefully. Of course I want to save the girl, and I have no intention of giving up. But if they try to kill her to save someone else, even if I try to stop them, well, in the end I won't be able to hold them back. Not unless I overcome them by force. He looked like a much different person than the Saber who had spoken lightheartedly, even about matters of his own life and death. Saber continued to speak not as a knight nor as a saber, but as the embodiment of something else that Aika did not recognize. So, if by some twist of fate, we're put in a position where someone has to kill her, when the time comes, I'll do it. What? Sorry, wrong one. Why? Aika shouted in spite of herself. She understood his reasoning. If a sacrifice became absolutely necessary, someone would have to do it. Even when it came to herself, she was not sure what she would do if she were told that she could save the girl, but would be left behind in this deserted city as a result. No, I'd probably sacrifice that little girl, who I've never met. No, I'm sure I would. Stained red. After all, stained red. I even let stained red. A girl I knew die. Stained bright crimson red. The color of Red Riding Hood's hood was indelibly seared into the insides of her eyelids. She wanted to scream but was unable to. If she collapsed here, she would no longer be able to talk with Saber. She would no longer be able to stop him. At that thought, she wrung words from deep in her throat, even as the world seemed to spin around her. Why? You don't have to do that. You don't. So why would you? Her words came out brokenly, barely forming her question. Yes. Saber, however, did his best to grasp Aika's intent and answer. I suppose it means that in the end, I wasn't able to become like the knights I admired. Saber then turned back to face the police officers, who were more than a little confused, although not as confused as Aika, and proudly declared. But you are different. You are splendid knights. What do you... Cutting Vera short, Saber, who had been a king in life, praised the officers as if extolling the virtues of his own followers. You fought honorably against that fearful bowman and survived, all to save a girl who is no relation of yours and who you have never even seen. Thus, you should continue to be defenders of the innocent. No, you must. You should never harm them, even to shield the rest of the people or society itself. Saber lowered his eyes after a momentary silence, as if he were looking at somewhere else, continued. Once you've done that, you lose control. I should be the one to bear the responsibility. Saber! Aika shouted again. No, that's not right. You're not like that. You always smile, and you never abandon anyone. Aika could not understand why she was shouting so emotionally. But it was not rational. She had a feeling that if she did not shout now, Saber, the heroic spirit who should be able to laugh with her, or who had been able to laugh with her until a moment before, would vanish before her eyes. She did not know the first thing about the Holy Grail War, and she thought that what she had to say was probably just the whining of a sheltered naif. Shut up. That's not a word. You just made that up. Do I have my phone near me? I don't have my phone near me to look this up. I'm gonna look this up. I'm gonna look up this word. What is a naif? Define naif. What is that? Naif. Naive or ingenuous. A naive or ingenuous person. I've never heard this term before. Wow. I mean, it makes sense. I could tell what it meant by context clues. But you are very clearly doing what I do and looking at synonyms, right? But she still forced out the words that welled up from deep in her chest. You think too highly of me, Ayaka. It's not because I'm your substitute master. I'm sure you'd save even a passing kid on the street. I can tell at least that much. You're not like me. You're not. I won't tell you to never kill anyone. It'd be selfish, and I don't have the right, but... At that point, Ayaka was briefly lost for words but gritted her teeth and spit out her shout, her raw emotion along with the reservations that had lodged themselves in the back of her throat. It doesn't matter if you get your hands dirty in the end. It won't erase the fact you saved me. But at least don't talk like you should be the bad guy. Finally, she concluded her display of passion with a declaration that crossed a line. So if someone has to be the bad guy, I'll do it. Saber listened to Ayaka, who sounded as if she were condemning herself and not him, and looked at her sorrowful face, and he found himself seeing his subordinates from when he was alive in her. Why, Your Majesty? Richard, you didn't need to bear those sins. Why didn't you leave it to us? You should have been a hero. Why didn't you have us do it and pretend not to know? Oh no, Your Majesty, your lion's heart has grown too great, should be T-O-O. You are too fearless. The words of the man who had followed him as his court mage came back to him, interrupting his reflections. Good grief, I knew it would come to this, of course. Still, I did try to stop you, and this is the result. Then again, if it hadn't turned out this way, it'd probably be a case for pruning. That said, even I, Saint Germain, am a bit appalled. Even the Mahatma is shocked. Oh my god, Mahatma. Yes, that's right. Exactly. You are wonderfully daring, lion-hearted. That's precisely why you had no fear. No fear of anything at all. Not 10,000 foes, not generals who outrank you, not mystical retaliation, not superhuman fiends, not even staining your own hands with the blood of countless innocents. Finally, like a curse cast out of the distant past, he recalled the words of his younger brother by blood. Oh, what are you worried about, brother? No matter how much blood you have on your hands, the people of this land are in your thrall. For some reason, it seems as though it's my job to take on your disgrace and have stones thrown at me. What do you think? Aren't I quite the clown? Go ahead and laugh, brother. Laugh. You're lucky. You're a national hero, aren't you? If you're a hero, then laugh. I see. Saber lowered his eyes and fell silent for a moment. When he opened them again, the resignation-tinged gleam like dim fire had left them, and they were his usual eyes again. You notice the smallest things as usual, Ayaka. Or so I'd like to say, but that's not quite right, is it? Of course not. Meeting you isn't small to me anymore. All right, I'll withdraw this time. But be warned, I won't lose next time. Huh? Was this a competition? Saber effectively ignored the confused and wide-eyed Ayaka and announced with his usual manner. I can hardly force Ayaka to do the dirty work, and she won't allow me to do it, so I'll just have to save the girl even if it costs me my life. Then we'll all leave this place safely. Saber? Saber beamed at Ayaka, who was confused by his sudden return to his usual attitude. It won't be a problem. The church was our starting point in this ward world. What do you say we shelter the girl who's dropped out instead of the priest and steal the overseer's thunder? Good idea. I'll help. Ayaka flashed a relieved grin, when a sudden vague apprehension brought a look of confusion to her face. Church. Shelter. What's wrong? Vera, who had kept silent up until that point, asked the troubled Ayaka, and realizing that the pair's conversation had finished for the moment. I think, Ayaka said haltingly, deep in thought, I've met that guy in the gold armor. What? But where? Ayaka was trying to remember something. She could not help feeling that she recognized the golden heroic spirit who tried to kill Richard from his vantage point of view on the roof of the church. And the keywords church and sheltering a child began to violently shake her brain, which had been locked down with a time-worn key. but at each jolt she could vividly sense Little Red Riding Hood's presence, and the fear she must not remember anymore kept the doors of her memory shut. I know I have to remember. So why? Aika struggled desperately to reach her own memories. She had a feeling that Little Red Riding Hood was right behind her. She had a feeling that she was trying to tell her something. She had a feeling that she could hear Little Red Riding Hood's voice. Aika tried to endure the terror and still keep thinking, until she saw Saber and the police officers begin looking around, and realized that her brain was not the only thing shaking. What? She muttered suspiciously, just as the soles of her feet began to clearly feel the earth pulse. An earthquake? No, not an earthquake. Something's coming towards us. Then, as the vibrations grew steadily stronger, it emerged from behind a building. An enormous pitch-black dog easily over 15 meters tall. Its entire body gave off a miasma-like smoke, and black flames, the same color as of its coat, dripped perpetually from its jaws. The jaws of the three-headed monster blessed by Hades. Oh, what the frick? What are we doing here? Several years earlier, somewhere in Europe. Who? What are we doing? So you'll accept the offer. I plan to refrain myself. Who's this? The mage, whose way of speaking gave an impression of cunning, had the outward appearance of a young girl. Who the frick are... Where? Okay, what are we doing? With the elegant clothes she wore suggested a sheltered young lady from a good family. The crow perched on her shoulder. Oh, is this Doris? Is this who we've heard about? The crow perched on her shoulder seemed strangely at home, giving rise to a sense that she was something out of the ordinary. She was a mage who, despite belonging to the clock tower, kept her distance from it out of a dislike for power struggles. Alright, there's a couple characters this could be. Her somewhat elderly way of speaking, in contrast to her sweet voice, was said to be because she was actually over 80 years old. Wait, who the frick? Or a result of inheriting her magic circuits, complete with the knowledge of their previous owners, but the truth was kept a mystery. This has got to be someone brand new then. Okay, this is just new. The mage with an air of experience was speaking to a girl magecraft user whose youthful air matched her appearance. Again, who are these people, I wonder? Okay. It's because you want to protect mage society. Ha! If a single ritual was enough to destroy our society, it'd be long gone by now. Or I'd like to say, but lately a rumor has it that a ritual in the Far East steeped into fairly dangerous territory. I find it odd that this Holy Grail War didn't attract much attention, despite a lord dying in one 10 years ago. But it looks like someone's been finessing the flow of information. The Holy Grail War. It had been known as a minor ritual in the Far East, but it had not attracted serious notice until a few months previously when the fifth ritual had been performed. Okay, so this is right after Stay Night. They had not managed to learn the details of what had been done or achieved in it. Still, plausible rumors had it that if things had gone badly, it would become one of the ends the hermits of the Atlas Institute spoke of. Well, I guess, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, no, I could see that. But also, you know what that makes me think of? That makes me think of friggin' Grand Order, right? Because literally, the Fuyuki Grail War going wrong and the world ending is kind of like what Grand Order is about, right? A bit, maybe. Don't give me spoilers from Japan, please. No respectable mage would accept a proposal as absurd as recreating the Holy Grail War in America, especially not without the backing of the Mages Association. They reached out to you because of your grudge against the association despite the quality of your bloodline. Or so I'd guess. I have a healthy respect for your talents, but when it comes to that monster, Francesca, individual ability is second at best. That doesn't bother me. The girl who stood before the mage with the crow on her shoulder was not yet 15 years old. Okay, who is this? Okay. Despite that, her gaze was filled with resignation toward the entire world, and the faint gleam deep in her eyes came from the dark flames of hate. At least the crow tamer mage was convinced it was so. Just between us, once, when I was participating in an auction on the Rail Zeppelin. Wait a sec, is this a... Is this a character from the Rail Zeppelin? I caught a glimpse of a ghost liner, one of these heroic spirits. It wasn't on the level of a familiar. It was a shadow of the human order engraved onto the earth itself. Don't think you can use one for personal vendetta and come out unscathed. If you want to destroy something big, you need to pay the price. The girl with the crow managed to continue to tell the girl, who lightly clenched her fists and dropped her gaze. Destroying the Mages Association is tantamount to making an enemy of Mage Society itself. There are any number of people prepared to be destroyed in the end themselves, but don't forget, your grandfather who gave up his humanity was one of them, and the order is backwards. The bigger thing you want to destroy is, the sooner you'll be destroyed first. Call it advanced payment. Huh. Just look at mages, the crafty lady mage with a youthful appearance continued to the girl magecraft user whose legal guardian she had become. Okay, so they're related, I guess. They strive to break the laws of nature and reach the root. And isn't every one of them broken? With a slightly deprecating smile, the mage's face became expressionless, and she asked the girl who had become her ward, okay, Haruri Borzak, will you break as a person or as a mage? Okay, so the young... Wait. So this is Haruri. She was a mage, kept her... Okay. Her elderly way of speaking was said because she was... Okay, so Haruri's super old. Oh, but the truth was kept a mystery. Okay, so Haruri's not young. That does make sense. Okay. Okay. Right? So, Haruri Borzak... Haruri, I gotta remember. Will you break as a person or as a mage? Neither, ma'am. The girl who called Haruri plainly answered the mage, who far outranked her. I was already broken a long time ago, broken by those people from the clock tower. Father and mother were both ordinary mages, but they were branded heretics and had everything taken from them. Also, the clock tower could get their hands on the research results they inherited from my grandfather, who had abandoned his humanity. Did we learn about who the grandfather was? Is it a friggin' dead apostle? Your life wasn't taken, was it? It was the Borzak's quick perception that allowed them to pass on their crest, albeit only partially to let you escape. If you conspire with that thing with Francesca, that will all have been for nothing. She made her tone slightly graver as she spoke, but there was no change in Haruri's expression. When the mage who was Haruri's guardian saw that, she let out a faint sigh and shook her head. If you were a mage, you would resign yourself to usurpation by the clock tower as a matter of course, but the instant you wish for revenge for your parents instead of restoration as a mage, you were no mage. You aren't broken yet. You could start over. You could stay hidden while using magecraft to make your life easier. She said that, but made no further attempt to stop Haruri. Haruri was only her ward, not her apprentice, and the relationship was not enforced by magecraft. She must have decided that it was not her path to get more deeply involved. She had a duty to descent of her acquaintances, the Borzaks, but that duty would not easily change to compassion. She might distance herself from the clock tower, but she was still that much of a mage. I believe that the lord I caught a glimpse of on the Rail Zeppelin, Alan Malloy II, I believe, would be willing to accept even someone at odds with Mage Society like you at his school, but I suppose it would be rude to detain you further. The crow's eyes flashed eerily as the mage walked off into the darkness. She walked like a girl of her apparent age who had lost her way at night, but the gaze of the crow on her shoulder was almost frighteningly sharp and remained fixed on the girl called Haruri. Never forget, Haruri. Did the voice that rang out on an instant before they melted into darkness come from the girl's mouth or the crow's plumage? The girl whose eardrums and spine shivered was no longer able to tell. No matter how prepared you are to break. Those last words, however, became reverberations that lingered in Haruri the magecraft user. Preparation won't mean a thing in the face of someone who was broken from the start. Okay, so my question is, I'm going to type in Rail Zeppelin characters to see if there's someone there who I am forgetting. I think there was a character who I just completely forgot about. Let's see here. If I go to... let me see. Was it... Wait. Is it... Oh, God, I totally forget the characters. I totally forget who all appeared in it. Rail Zeppelin... Just trying to find a page... Because the fandom wiki stops loading for me. Freaking hate fandom wiki. Wasn't there a lady who was on the train with them? Who I forget? God, I wish I could just go on the fandom wiki. Okay, behind the voice actors, that might help. Okay, so there was Elmaloy and Gray, not Rhinus. Because I remember, okay, so there was Yvette, but I don't think it's Yvette. Oh, I'm thinking of maybe Hishiri Adashino? The one who looks like the sort of old Japanese lady. What was her deal? She was the officer of the Department of Policies. She punishes mages. I don't think that's her, because she doesn't look young. I don't think it's Olga Marie. Could be wrong about that too. God, I don't remember half the people who are in this. Right? I don't know. It's also entirely possible that this is a character that was only in the novelization and was maybe left out from the anime, so I might just not know who it is. If this character comes back later, don't tell me. If not, please tell me. Anyways, the present Snowfield, a luxury residential district. A woman's voice rang out in the real Snowfield. There was somehow an unreal beauty to it. I was sure he'd come rushing to track me down right now, but Utu is high in the sky and there's still no sign of him. He's surprisingly cautious considering his best friend just got crushed. A luxury residential area in the Snowwork district. Its largest mansion belonged to the owner of the casino building in the city center. Publicly, at least. The owner was a proxy put in place during the city's construction, a businessman who had died from illness at young age and was merely made to appear alive. The casino building was actually managed by one of the mages on the inside, who used magecraft to disguise himself as a late businessman to fool the eyes of the public when it was absolutely necessary for the owner to put in an appearance. As a result, this elegant mansion, which looked like it might belong to a minor Hollywood star, had no real owner. Its only visitors were service people who performed the bare minimum of maintenance necessary to keep up appearances. And yet, a group was currently using the mansion as if it belonged to them. A woman lounged on a pure white sofa so luxurious it probably cost as much as a small house on its own. She was sitting casually, but she gave the impression that she would make a perfect picture no matter who looked at her or from what angle, as if she were the very definition of beauty. Oh well, doesn't matter. I want to let Googleana do the honors of wiping out that piece of junk anyway. The person stuck having that impression seared directly into her eyes was a girl still in her late teens. Haruri Borzak, the girl who was watching the goddess from a corner of the enormous room, was staring at Philia, the woman on the sofa, with a somewhat gloomy look in her eyes. What's got you looking so down? Haruri answered Philia's question in a tone of mingled caution and fear. Would you please tell me your name? Oh, you're still hung up on that? Didn't I tell you? If you haven't realized how charming I am, you don't need to know anything else. Right now, it isn't charm, just charm. I feel afraid too. I know I said that all I cared about was that you'd save me, but since we're gonna fight together, I'd at least like to know your name. Haruri was terrified, but she still looked Philia in the eyes. She spoke. Oh, Philia answered with a faintly bewitching smile. I see you've gotten awfully assertive. You told Bastalot and his servant that you were a goddess. As a mage, it's hard to believe, well, but at the very least, you're not a mage. You're something higher, much higher, aren't you? That's such an obvious question, I don't even know how to answer it. I mean, all I can say is, of course, and that's boring. Philia shrugged, taking a sip from her glass. Even that gesture seemed so beautiful it almost convinced Haruri that she was looking at the ideal form of relaxation. Still, I suppose you have a point. Now that I've practically finished off Gilgamesh, there's no real point in hiding my name, is there? And I was the one who told you to get away from that hospital because you'd probably get dragged in and die. After a brief pause for thought, Philia rose leisurely from the sofa and continued speaking to Haruri. What I told Avenger and his master wasn't a figure of speech. I'm not a human who is called a goddess either. I'm a genuine goddess. What? I'm a goddess of beauty who governs abundant harvests, bestows fortune, glory, and ruin on warriors with the radiance of Venus, and protects people. That's enough to give a mage like you at least an idea, right? Haruri gasped at the declaration that goddess was meant literally. Still, she had half expected it and did not fall into doubt or confusion. She would have liked to be wrong, but she had already put her life in Philia's hands and it was too late to refuse. And the numerous fragmentary hints Philia dropped led her to a name. A goddess of Venus. Aphrodite, Venus, Astarte, or Astarte. Is it Astarte or Astarte? I don't know. That's an FGL though. Closer to the source. Inanna? Oh, that's me too, but I prefer my Sumerian name, although that depends on my mood when I manifest. The goddess Ishtar. You got it. Good thing you didn't get it wrong, huh? Philia left her glass, which was still partially full, on a marble table. Walking casually, she picked up the TV remote and pressed the on button. She flicked through several channels before a jeweler's segment on a shopping channel caught her eye, and she began to mutter with great interest. The cuts are gorgeous. Magecraft has declined, but if this is the result of specializing in technology, well, that may not be such a bad thing. In terms of taste, the artisans of Uruk suit me better, but oh well, I'll respect this area's sensibilities when it comes to that at least, she said, toying with the jewelry she had found around the house and smiling happily. After all, in the end, all techniques and tastes come down to whether or not they suit me. They'd probably been prepared as camouflage or as mystical catalysts for the mansion's real owner, but any of them still might cost over $50,000 in an ordinary jewelry shop. Still, Haruri could not shake the feeling that price had nothing to do with it. Even if they had been cheap gems or even glasswork or marbles, the mere act of holding them seemed to make them standards of beauty and enhance their inherent value. A goddess of beauty. It was true that she was so beautiful that it seemed disrespectful to even look at her directly. At the same time, that frightened Haruri. Genuinely perfect beauty could become great magecraft, nearly magic in and of itself. Whoa, where are we going with this? For instance, Haruri had heard rumors of the gold and silver princesses of the Aselma family, powerful mages of Value, the school of creation at the clock tower. Okay, that sounds familiar, but I don't recall where I've heard that before. That definitely sounds familiar. They were supposed to project a beauty so perfect that it blotted out the consciousness of anyone nearby just by existing. Haruri had never seen their faces, but she surmised that the goddess of beauty in front of her was something else entirely. If the Aselma princesses were the result of generations of mages studying to approach the root from the perspective of beauty and achieving a height at which the forms seemed to reflect the universe itself, then what this goddess had ought to be described as a completely different category that just happened to also use the word beauty. The goal of the Aselma family's beauty was ultimately a method to reach the root. If they ever did reach it, it would be a domain worthy of the name otherworldly beauty. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna look this up because they must have been brought up at some point. Fate is Selma. I'm gonna look this up. Let's see here. Appears in Elmaloy case files. Got it. It's all I need to know. It was definitely brought up somewhere, but that's all I need to know. Ironically, what the goddess possessed was the opposite, otherworldly beauty, befitting of the heavens applied to earthly forms. You could call it the end goal of beauty as it is meant near the human sphere. The kind of finished product that fell from an unreachable height and painted over its surroundings with itself. The self-proclaimed goddess before her eyes was like if the golden ratio defined everything it wore as fashionable and fixed that conception on its surroundings. Her way of being broke the rules. If the human sense of beauty is a type of crisis avoidance or pleasure mechanism developed for survival, then her beauty was the opposite. Her beauty was something that gave to humans. If the goddess was aware that she possessed perfect beauty and that she was the standard of beauty, As a result, she must regard beauty as something that inevitably belonged with her, and the act of studying herself as totally alien. Haruri could not help surmising as much, even though the goddess was just standing in front of her. That was why Haruri admired her freedom, and why also she feared that she would be eliminated if she deviated even slightly from the aesthetic sense of this entity beyond human understanding. A feeling worthy of the name awe welled up within Haruri. She fought the urge to fall to her knees as she expressed a doubt that had suddenly occurred to her. I thought it wasn't possible to summon a divinity in the Holy Grail War. No, it isn't. It's normally impossible for a Holy Grail. There are a handful of nearly heretical ways to do it, but it'd be impossible to summon a divinity of my caliber with a localized ritual like this, and especially not with a fake Holy Grail that's lost its proper function. Oh, but if you use the Holy Grail as a wish granter at the end of the ritual, for example, you could probably at least get me to listen to you. Then how? Haruri persisted in her question. I only manifested here, the goddess within Philia answered carelessly, because power I'd left in this world from the start activated. Power? That's right. A blessing I bestowed on this world. Her existence here was a result of a blessing to the world. Haruri's face made it plain that she did not understand what the goddess meant. Philia shrugged and continued. Of course, it would probably be a curse to those blasphemers. You mean the goddess Ishtar's power resides in that vessel? Well, not just my power, my personality too. Although they're basically the same to beings like us. This body just had a program in it, you know. It's very easy to overwrite. I think she's a sacrificial priestess prepared as a final terminal to receive the Grail's power, or something like that. The goddess seemed uninterested in her vessel's origins. She returned the topic to herself as she stared happily at the jewelry. There was a time when we could manifest in our proper forms, but if this were back then, the humans in this town would have burst and died a long time ago. Whoa. Modern human bodies can't withstand the magical energy of the age of gods. Haruri had heard something like that before. The age where gods and humans had coexisted was over, and magical energy was vanishing from the world. Humanity had adapted to that environment and their bodies could no longer withstand their original one. Haruri did not know if it was evolution or regression, but just as humans could not survive in too high an oxygen density, they had already begun to part ways with the world of magic. And not at a societal level, with the exception of mages and magecraft users who continued to use magical energy. Well, the environmental changes and my inability to manifest are for different reasons. Even if you recreated the same environment and tried to summon me, well, I suppose it would be noble if I thought of it as a sacrifice, but there's really no point if there aren't any humans to praise me in exchange for protection. Then why go to the trouble of manifesting in an era like, I told you, I bestowed a blessing on the world. It just activated successfully. At that point, the goddess narrowed her eyes and flashed a bewitching smile. I can hardly believe that something like this could really happen. I'd like to applaud the me back then. You see, when I was insulted by a blasphemous king and that piece of junk threw my divine beast's entrails at me, I seared a blessing into the world. I kept going until I dissolved the human order and vanished. Fear is beauty. Beauty is primordial fear. That was how it seemed to Haruri when she looked into Philia's eyes. Her keen features made Haruri's blood run cold. They were just too beautiful. If she had been the object of their hatred, Haruri felt sure that not only would she be unable to resist, she would actually feel grateful. The perfected rage and hatred of a goddess of beauty. To be precise, a vestige of the passions of the deities who once ruled this planet were reigniting an ancient wrath within the vessel called Philia. And if those two ever returned to this planet and reunited, faced with the miracle she had arrived at amid an infinite expanse of possibilities, the being who called herself a goddess wore a smile so beautiful that it would freeze the heart of anyone who saw it. I would devote my divinity and soul to protecting humans. Then, as if to answer those words, a grating sound came from the mansion courtyard. Haruri did not turn to look. She knew that she would see nothing if she did. Haruri's servant, rendered invisible by magecraft, had stationed itself in the courtyard. Because it absorbed rubble from Bastilot's workshop, which it had destroyed, it actually put more strain on it to dematerialize. So they were getting by with invisibility magecraft and magical energy concealment. The woman who called herself Ishtar seemed still to be able to perceive the servant clearly, because she looked up into the courtyard through a glass wall and said, "Don't you think so too?" In response, a sound like the grating of a massive ship's propeller rang out from the courtyard. "Oh, honestly, it sounds like she thinks those stone towers are the cedar forests of Lebanon," the goddess said with a shrug and a wry smile, as if to a pet dog. "All right, I'll take you to a real forest later. That piece of junk is probably there. But now that Gilgamesh is out of the picture and he's gained reason, he won't pose a threat." Oh, we're doing a throwback to the distant past in a forest of gigantic trees. "You need to learn about humans. Utu created a complete human in the forest of Enlil. Behold her, tell of her, mold yourself in her image. Ninurta will then share his power with you. Before we loose you into the forest of Uruk, you must spend time with the human Utu has raised. Complete yourself and become humanoid, for you are a lump of clay that imitates all life. The will of the gods. When the lump of clay that had the duty carved into an irresistible, comfortable slumber awakened in this world. The world was engulfed in a scream that rent heaven and earth. It had no meaning as words. It was a swirling vortex of pure, undirected emotion. The first thing that the tool called Enkidu observed in this world was an everlasting series of screams. The chains of sounds alone destroyed nearby objects and soon reduced everything to dust. In the process of being created by the gods, he or she was discarded into the heart of that vortex of shrieks. However, discarded was merely an objective description. In reality, it was fair to say that the gods were pouring all their efforts into making that weapon supreme. He or she was a divine homunculus, a tool, weapon, an independent processing mechanism that the gods of Mesopotamia had created to rebind a child who had degenerated into a human to the gods. That was why, as a necessary step, Enkidu had been placed in the midst of that clamorous voice. He or she had been dropped there with something akin to love, like an infant into its first bath as a final precaution. Enkidu recognized the series of thunderous roars as human voice after 80 days in the noise. The processor had been dropped into the world in the state of innocence, input only with the role gods had bestowed upon him or her and a bare minimum of information. He or she had to begin building up everything by choosing what would be necessary and what types of knowledge to accumulate. And intellectually, Enkidu had already been given the answer, defined by the gods as to what the sound of the screams was. It was being called a human. It was, the gods proclaimed, the apotheosis and perfection of human species that Enkidu must go on to confront. In his or her initial state, Enkidu did not know what words were. From his or her perspective, the mighty words of the gods were imprinted as sensations. Even so, Enkidu continued to face that perfect human and to expose him or herself to its cries. As a result, in order to answer the voice, Enkidu was transforming into something like a gargantuan clay doll. If the automaton had been completely suffused in the screams, then he or she would not have been able to achieve mutual understanding with the sacred prostitute Shamhat. Enkidu might not have been able to recognize Shamhat as human. That was how greatly different the perfect human he had encountered through God's guidance differed from the humans who walked on two legs in Babylon. The thing that would link Enkidu to human society at the last possible moment was a young girl's voice that rose amid the endless screams like bubbles from seaweed. Who is it? Is someone there? Before Enkidu was aware of it, little flowers were blooming around him or her. The god's processor would learn. The storm of screams calmed as if it had never been, and a series of delicate sounds that seemed to mean something rang out, but only for the brief time that those flowers continued to bloom. After a long time, Enkidu realized what those sounds were, what words were, and the independent processor learned. Enkidu learned that it was true that the cries like ceaseless thunder had no meaning as words, that they were continuing to carve the emotion called resentment into the world in the form of a curse. They never ended. They never reached a destination. The humans just continued to scream a curse that would never conclude in a place that was, to Enkidu, the beginning of the world. When Enkidu realized that, however, he or she was unfazed. If these were the beings called humans the gods spoke of, then this must be how the humans were. Enkidu dispassionately recorded that fact as basis for calculations. Caught between the endless screams and the gentle girl's voice that occasionally surfaced, the processor could not even distinguish gentleness, accumulated knowledge about humans with complete detachment. Only the mission that the gods had given him or her continued to echo within Enkidu's hollow soul. Converse with humans. Pierce them and stitch them fast. A calculating lump of clay that was not even yet a doll. Enkidu simply judged that it was necessary for his or her mission and attempted further communication with the perfect human. At that point, Enkidu had merely memorized her whispered words and grasped the situation. He or she had not yet reached that level of conversation. Groping for a way to fulfill the role that he or she had been given, Enkidu attempted various forms of conversation with the perfect human. In the process one day, Enkidu made flowers bloom. Enkidu retained no record of memory as of why he or she thought to do that. It may have been a coincidence, or some factor that the then incomplete Enkidu could not identify may have been involved. But the result at least was burned into Enkidu's circuits. The cries of resentment calmed for just an instant, and she brought her body to the surface. Thank you. Pretty, aren't they? Enkidu did not notice a slight tremor in his or her system at the sound of that voice. Later, however, the weapon understood. That would have been the first moment that he or she had succeeded in a mutual exchange of wills. Time and words flowed on. Enkidu remembered the precise number of days, but he or she saw no meaning in it. To the weapon, it did not matter how much time had passed, only how it had come to understand humans. Hey, we're your friends, Enkidu, but soon we won't be friends anymore, because we can't go anywhere. We won't be able to see the same things as you anymore. We're sure to forget about you. To us, you were like a flower, Enkidu. You saved us from being lonely. We hope that you'll meet someone like a flower one day too, Enkidu. Someone who will bloom again, even if they wither and die. Someone like a flower that blooms anywhere before you know it. Before Enkidu knew it, she had begun to form a tiny individual body when she rose from the swarm of resentful voices. The sound emitting apparatus and visual and auditory sensors packed into that little body caught Enkidu's attention. Cranium, face, head. Enkidu matched the images that the gods had given him or her with the words he or she had learned from her. The top of that head that seemed as if Enkidu could crush it with the slightest exertion was decorated with a flower he or she had made bloom a few days before. Then, she picked up a different flower in her hand. It was one of the tiny flowers that she made bloom when she first surfaced, on the day that Enkidu first encountered her. When she used that flower to decorate Enkidu's head, which was just a massive lump of clay, she twisted the visual sensors and speech emitter on her head into odd shapes. It was much later that Enkidu learned it was called a smile. And so at that time, Enkidu was more concerned with the things that floated around her. There were 7 little rings of light that shone like rainbows just after the rain that seemed to guard her. Enkidu judged that those rings of light were perfect things and etched their radiance into his or her soul. The gargantuan lump of clay, which was massive enough to take all the cries of resentment that they let out when the girl's form was submerged, and attuned his or her mental makeup for that purpose, allowed something like what humans call hope to well up in his or her soul for the first time. Even when he or she obeyed the god's commands and left the forest, even if he or she destroyed humans for the sake of his or her duty, he or she had to see that perfect, beautiful radiance again. Enkidu etched that wish into his or her system without even analyzing why. The weapon would get his or her wish a long time later, but the next time Enkidu saw her, that radiance. So there's some interesting stuff here that I'm a bit confused about. what are the 7 rings of light that were guarding her? Because, like, I've heard the story with Shamat here in FGO. But what were those rings? That's new. Huh. The present. Snowfield, Crystal Hill, upper floors. The flowers that bloomed the first time he met her. What color had they been? The upper floors of Crystal Hill. The direct elevator to the top floor suite was currently only usable by a select group of people. So this is actual Snowfield, right? Yeah. And the official reason being damaged glass due to high winds. Enkidu suddenly found himself reflecting on events from his life as he walked the red carpet hallway one floor below that led to the suite. As he walked the red carpet hallway, 1 floor below that led to the suite, yeah. Reflecting on the flowers that had grown thickly in the deep forest where he had spent time with the being called Hawawa, he remembered the color of the flowers that he made bloom later. He made clusters of pale blue flowers bloom for her. Enkidu would never create them on his own because there was no need. But if someone asked to see them, he could do so easily. In the end, however, he could not remember the color of the flowers that had been with her, the personality that called itself Huwawa. Why did Enkidu try to think of those flowers, which existed in a realm that was neither a record for his completion nor a memory? Enkidu self-analyzed the reason and immediately arrived at 2 answers, and lowered his gaze with a faint smile. It was less a smile of self-derision than of pure nostalgia. One reason was that he learned that his former sibling, Huwawa, which again, I think we sometimes call Humbaba, right? I think it's the same thing, was manifesting in the world. The other, it's not about personality or the color of their souls. Their transience might be a little similar. Enkidu continued to advance, sensing the presence of a girl in the inner recesses on the top of the floor. He turned a corner and found several men and women in black eyeing him with confusion and alarm. "Hey, who are you? Stop right there! This area is off limits to..." "Wait. Bare feet, that's really funny. You can't just drop that line in. Can this be real? He's not a mage. His magical energy is like the earth itself. A servant. Don't tell me that's Lancer." Only a few select members of the organization occupying the suite were familiar with Enkidu's appearance. Only the ones who had used their familiars to watch the battle with Gilgamesh on the first day. They'd been told his distinguishing features, but none of them expected him to just walk up to them in the hallway in broad daylight. The magical energy that coursed through the heroic spirit's body was both of the same type as the magical energy that flowed through the Earth's ley line and as peaceful as a calm sea. Many magecraft users and mages would not be able to detect it, even at close quarters. That was why, now that they had detected it, they understood. It was like they had caught a whiff of seawater by the shore and suddenly realized there was a massive whale in front of them. It was too late to launch an attack. They doubted that anything they tried would have worked, even if they had struck first. There was almost nothing that they, who had not made contracts with heroic spirits, could do. Their superiors had even given them strict orders to never engage a heroic spirit if one appeared. They remained keenly aware of their holstered guns and offensive mystic codes, but none of them reached for one. The heroic spirit saw that and spoke with a smile. The voice could be taken for male or female, but the heroic spirit's sex didn't matter to the black-suited guards. Not only his physical beauty, but everything, including the magical energy they sensed from within him. The way he moved as he walked toward them told them that this was a perfect body. In face of that fact, age and sex were trivialities. Types of curse or magecraft that varied according to sex would be meaningless before this mighty being regardless. "I'm going through." The heroic spirit calmly said that short sentence. The black-suited group, every inch of their skins breaking out in cold sweat, were powerless to do anything. They stood petrified. As the heroic spirit passed them by, he lowered his gaze slightly, as if in thought, paused and said, "You can relax. I haven't come to fight. In fact, if you had chosen to fight, the thing you ought to be protecting might have ended up as collateral damage." The look on the guards' sweat-drenched faces said that they did not understand what Enkidu was trying to say. He, still smiling, dispassionately stated the facts to them without a hint of irony or approbation. "I mean that you didn't make the wrong decision, so you don't need to feel responsible. I hope that you will continue to make correct choices. Correct choices for whom? They wanted to ask but could not get words out. They felt that the heroic spirit, who had done nothing but walk past them, had grasped their entire beings, and it terrified them. And then that heroic spirit glanced back at them and said, "It's all right, Master. I've disarmed all of the security systems in this hallway. That means it's safe." Master. At that word, the guards' tension reached its limit. They were shocked to discover that the heroic spirit had disarmed all the defensive magecraft without appearing to do anything. But the reason he had done so was even more troubling. The fact that it was not just a servant. A master had marched in on them as well. The leader they were supposed to be guarding had currently as good as lost her servant. If this master had come to propose alliance, would they just eliminate her once they realized the situation? The worried group shifted his attention to the corner of the hallway. A moment later, with slow, cautious steps, sniffing as it went, a sleek, silver-coated wolf rounded the bend. Crystal Hill, top floor suite. Have you come to slay His Majesty? Or this is Teenage Hulk. Have you come to slay His Majesty? The girl, Teenage Hulk, quietly asked Enkidu when he opened the door. There were more than 10 of her black-clad subordinates in the room. Like the group in the hallway, however, they were unable to make any careless moves when suddenly confronted with a servant. A nervous thrill ran through the room at Tine's question. The tension, however, was relieved by a few mild words from Enkidu, who stepped into the room with a silver wolf. That's a correct inference for a master in the Holy Grail War, but it doesn't match the facts. Then, have you come to execute me? I've disgraced His Majesty, your best friend. That's not right either. Enkidu shook his head, still smiling but somehow dispassionate. Tina's attention was focused on Enkidu, but she was not looking at him. She was in the middle of what was, in a sense, a sumptuous mage's workshop furnished with the King of Heroes' personal possessions, continuously channeling vast quantities of magical energy into the being who lay supine at its center. Your magic circuits. No, you yourself are linked to this land, aren't you? Enkidu sounded impressed. I see. No wonder you have a similar aura. Your people tried the same thing as the old gods. Tina looked slightly confused by Enkidu's strange remarks, but it seemed that she could not spare the time to pursue the question because she continued to direct the magical energy into the center. Okay, well, there's a picture there. Yeah, she's just filling him up. Center of the room without giving him so much as a glance. Do you know about me? His Majesty calls you his friend. Tina still did not look at Enkidu. Every inch of her body was drenched in sweat as she manipulated extraordinary quantities of magical energy. Nevertheless, she responded in a firm voice, apparently determined to not show weakness. I can only think of one heroic spirit that His Majesty would call a friend, and who would also compete with him in raw power. I wonder. That was probably true while I was alive, Enkidu answered evasively. The black-suited subordinates near Tine gradually began to move again. If you don't intend to fight, what are you doing here? An elderly man warily asked Enkidu. The suspicion in the man's voice was faintly tinged with hope. Enkidu guessed his meaning and shook his head apologetically. If you believe I've come to save King Gilgamesh, I'm afraid you will be disappointed. Most of the room's occupants looked discouraged by the heroic spirit's words, and Tine's shoulders trembled slightly. The thing in the center of the room, the thing Enkidu was staring at, was indeed the King of Heroes' corpse. The Ainsburn homunculus, who Gilgamesh had called Ishtar. Thanks to her interference, Gilgamesh had been pierced by Alkidi's arrows, and then impaled by the gargantuan something that had appeared immediately afterward. It was an undeniably fatal blow. Worse, his body was being eaten away by some force, and his wounds continued to rot even while he was alive. The only reason that his physical body still existed was that Tine was drawing in massive quantities of magical energy from the ley lines to hold his spirit origin in its human shape and keep it from disintegrating by brute force. Surveying Gil in that state, retaining only the form of a servant, Enkidu dispassionately stated his opinion. There are 2 venoms eating away at Gil's body. If it were just Hydra venom, I could force open Gil's treasury and probably find an antidote. He used to say that he was going to hunt the Viper at the world's end one day after all. His treasury might even yield a cooking utensil or two made just for them in addition to corpses and antidotes. Enkidu continued to speak casually, as if he were telling everyday jokes. Tine gritted her teeth and responded with a tinge of anger, still not looking at him. Aren't you His Majesty's friend? How can you speak so calmly when... Her shout was too dignified to be the temper of a girl who was still in some ways a child. Enkidu accepted it at her side. He stopped smiling, but his expression remained composed as he replied, It's because I'm his friend. What? Gil and I spent irreplaceable days together. We'd already finished our eternal parting and the grief that came with it. The current us are shadows burned into the human order. We may rejoice at our reunion, but we don't need to grieve at parting again. I don't believe that Gil would shed a tear if I were the one lying here on the verge of death, and I wouldn't ask him to. Confusion suffused Tine's profile. She glanced at Enkidu just once, but her experience of life was too short to judge the truth of the heroic spirit's words by his expression. I believe it will be difficult for you to understand, but I can guess your reason for directing your anger at me. So if it will make you feel better, feel free to curse at me as much as you like. When she heard that, Tine turned her face fully toward Enkidu for the first time. Her eyes showed a range of emotions. Anger, sadness, fear. Then after a momentary look that might have been begging for help, she lowered her head and said frustratingly, No, it wouldn't. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. A clear apology to Enkidu spilled from the lips of the mage, who was still in some ways a child. You aren't the one I hate. Massive quantities of magical energy coursed through Tine's magic circuits. Every nerve of her body was beginning to groan in protest. As she spoke, however, her face was twisted not with pain but with regret. I couldn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Tine felt silent. You used 2 command spells, didn't you? Enkidu asked calmly, neither comforting nor blaming. Enkidu was looking at the back of Tine's left hand. The majority of her command spells, the mark of a master, were faded. Just one remained. One to summon him back here, and another to attempt to heal him. That was a good decision for a master. Without it, there would be no chance that Gilgamesh could maintain the form of his spirit origin. You said that there are 2 types of venom, Tine asked without slackening her efforts to maintain Gilgamesh's spirit origin. She seemed to be grasping Enkidu's personality, because the side of her had been built up as a mage began to show on her face. Yes, the other is closer to a curse than a toxin. Enkidu narrowed his eyes as he surveyed the wound gouged in Gilgamesh's torso. I suppose this is what you call irony. I don't suppose it was a rainbow-colored light. Oh wait, no, the irony question mark. I don't suppose it was a rainbow-colored light that impaled King Gilgamesh's body. Do you know what that was? The scene of Gilgamesh being struck down replayed in Tine's mind. The 7-colored halo, distinct from the titanic mechanical something. The way it twisted into a shape like the tip of a rock drill and impaled Gilgamesh through the belly, which I think in the anime was changed to his head, wasn't it? Or like his shoulder? Like they changed it to be even a bigger hit. That was the protection of the gods. It's also a curse to the human race. The light that was poured into Gil was one of them, a curse descended from pestilence. Oh. Pestilence? Wait, Pale Rider? Pale Rider. Let's go SMT. Pale Rider is the horseman of what? It's the horseman of death, right? So wait, do we have another one of the horsemen? Wait. 4 Rider of Pestilence? Which one is that one? The first horseman is called Pestilence. Okay. Let's go SMT Pestilence. Which one is that one? Pestilence Rider? Which one is that? Oh no, Pale Rider is the pestilence one. Okay, wait. What are the 4 riders of the apocalypse? God, I wish I could quickly Google stuff. I hate how everything is a wiki now. Right? Okay. No, I'm not gonna look this up. Okay. Okay. It's just interesting, though. It's just interesting. No, you know, Pale Rider SMT. I'm gonna do this real quickly. Right? Because I wish I could get on the frickin' Neco-Tan wiki. I hate this. Pale Rider. Let's just go Wikipedia. Okay. Pale Rider. Not the Clint Eastwood movie. Okay. 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. So, Control F. Pestilence. The first horseman is the White Horseman. Okay. White Rider. So wait, White Rider is Pestilence. So this is different. Because then the last one's the pale one, which represents death. This is different. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Okay. Anyways, Pestilence. We should probably be grateful for the Hydra venom. It and the Pestilence are competing with and consuming each other. That's why the plague hasn't spread from Gil's body. If not for that, there's a high probability that all of you, and probably me, would also be trapped in the abyss of death by now. Tine and her subordinates gasped at Enkidu's casual statement. Oh, there's no need to change his treatment. In my estimation, both the venom and the curse will disappear along with the spirit origin of the body called Gilgamesh. It's not his spirit origin anymore. That thing here is now the corpse of an ancient human. What was that thing? That metal giant? What do you know? Let me see. Where should I start? Enkidu lowered his gaze as if in thought, and began to tell his reason for coming there little by little. I came here because I wanted to know a little more about all of you. About us? I mean, you tried to use Gil, and he spared your lives. I was curious what you were like. Gil was also curious about my master, but... Enkidu smiled at Tine, and continued out stating what his own judgment had been. Nothing would please me more if we could work together. I also want to do all that I can to remove that wicked deity from this stage. What deity? Do you mean that steel monster that stabbed His Majesty? No, I mean... The next instant, Enkidu raised his head as if he'd noticed something. There's someone here. What? Enkidu slowly surveyed the surrounding space without answering Tine's question. Is this a human? It's like a human, but... Do you mean that someone is hiding in this room? Tine probed the magical energy in confusion, but she could sense nothing of the kind. Enkidu, however, seemed certain of the presence and wiped the emotion from his face. He said, No, they aren't hiding. It's probably the opposite. It seems that something is trying to probe this place from the reverse side of this world. That would make me mark out if I didn't already know what's going on. So, anyways, wow, this is a long chapter. Closed off town, Crystal Hill, top floor suite. I knew it. This room looks like it has the thinnest walls. The snowfield recreated inside the mysterious ward. In the top floor suite of the Crystal Hill were Flatiscardos, Berserker Jack the Ripper, and the Holy Church personnel led by Hansa Cervantes. I see. But what is this place? It's like the top floor of a hotel, but I don't know who's speaking. It doesn't look like guest accommodations. It reminds me of a mage's workshop, but the furnishings are too needlessly extravagant for that. Okay, that was Jack. Fla responded to Jack's question by looking around the room in glowing amazement. Don't you think it's kind of like a museum? It's pretty jewels and gold dishes and all kinds of amazing things. The space, which ought to be the hotel's most luxurious room, was decorated with countless sparkling treasures that looked brand new despite their antique style. The assortment really could plausibly be some kind of exhibit. I've seen these in the professor's lectures. I'm pretty sure the treasure's from somewhere around Mesopotamia, but, they're The way they're made, they should have some magical energy stored inside, but I don't sense any. They don't seem like fakes, but it's like they're empty shells. It's weird. Lowercase F Flat commented as he stared intently at the furnishings. But if the walls are thinnest here, Hansa cut in from behind him. Does that mean that altitude is the key? No, I don't think it's like that. I got a feeling this place is uniquely in harmony with the world outside the barrier. Like both sides are connected or... At that point, Flat shifted his focus to a point at the center of the suite, to the middle of the largest room. What looked like a magic circle of a system unfamiliar at the clock tower was drawn on the floor here, but the target of that magecraft was missing from its center. What's this? It looks like a circle for stabilizing something, but there's nothing here. From the looks of things... Oh no, no, I think that was Hansa there. From the looks of things, this must be some faction's workshop after all. I'm technically neutral. I can guess who it belongs to, but I decline to comment. Hansa went out of his way to explain something, something he could easily have left unsaid with a shrug. Jack maintained the bare minimum of cautious attention on Hansa and the nuns who were inspecting the room as he continued. Could the circle be empty simply because they haven't begun the ritual yet? No. It's strange. I've got the feeling that something is already happening here, but the circle really isn't active, but this is definitely the place. Platt waved his hand over the center of the empty circle with a look of confusion. The reason this place has the strongest connection to the world outside the ward, well, to the real city is... Oh, we're back here. Enkidu's voice rang out outside the ward, on top of the real Crystal Hill. Yes, something is definitely here, but I can only sense its presence. When teenage subordinates heard that, each of them seized a weapon or missed a code and frantically looked around the room. Their faces, however, showed confusion. It seemed they could not even find traces of of magical energy. Enkidu's high presence detection skill, however, was certainly detecting the fluctuation. When he found its center, he looked with faint surprise at the face of his half-corpse friend. This wasn't accounted for, I suspect. There was something human about the grin that quietly spread over his face, in contrast to his usually near-expressionless smile, but no one in the room saw it. Still, you haven't really changed, Gil. Guessing what had befallen the venom and curse-ridden Gilgamesh, Enkidu had quietly accepted its course, all the while allowing a light of hope, unbecoming of an arithmetic logic unit, to flicker in his heart of hearts. I'm amazed you can still pull the fate of the world to yourself even after your functions have halted. Countless gleaming golden chains sprouted from the hem of his robe and instantly spread to all sides of the room. What are you? Tine cried out, and her black-suited guards tensed. Enkidu, however, reassuringly spread his arms in a gesture of defenselessness and said, Please, don't be concerned. This isn't an attack against you, although I'm sorry to say that it isn't to protect you either. Enkidu winked like a mischievous child while erecting several layers of defensive measures only around the silver world sprawled at his feet, his master, and wistfully recalled his adventuring days as he continued. I'm just going to become someone's tool, as always. In this case, I suppose that in your terms, I'll be a booster. Back to the other world. Huh? Flat let out a cry of surprise, and the others turned to stare at him. What is it? Something wrong? No, not exactly a problem. Flat answered Hansa with a look of confusion. Maybe more like a problem got solved. Flat manipulated magical energy with the fingertips of both hands, began overwriting the magic circle inscribed on the floor. What do you intend to do? Flat continued to work while he answered Jack. Since asphalt that was torn up in the real world is fine here, I think it'd probably ignore major damage and decide to not copy-paste it. But an enemy faction's magic circle still being here means that the range of things it would be inconvenient to copy must be pretty narrow. Recreating the entire city inside a ward is copying and pasting? I see young clock tower mages are even up to date in their expressions. Hansa shrugged and watched Flat work with interest. Thank you very much. I may not look like it, but I'm in the school of modern magecraft. It's all thanks to the professor that I'm up to date. Flat, however, meanwhile, shot back at a slightly off-base answer and continued to survey the surroundings. I knew it. The closest thing to this place is probably a reality marble, but still, no, I doubt anyone but the professor could put it well in words. I only saw it before. It's not like we covered in class. So what? I've seen something like this once before in Wales. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, Blackmore Cemetery. Okay, so this is that's like what, the first Elmaloy thing, and was skipped over, but this is Gray's origin story. I know about this. In Wales, that was in a cemetery. But if that was a ward world that recreates the past, this must be a ward world that recreates the present. In Wales? Don't tell me you mean the Blackmore Cemetery, founded by a clan with strong ties to dead apostles. A priest I know and a nun I never got along with nearly died getting in some trouble there. That's the Tsukihime 2 characters, huh? That's gotta be. Holy crap. But I never figured you'd be mixed up with that place too. God, wait, has every Tsukihime 2 character been part of this? Well, except Solomon. Hansa sounded surprised. For some reason, Flat's eyes shone with delight. How do you know about that? Yeah, this world inside the ward is like a massive stage set up to be like a whole fake city. You see that as a setting in games sometimes. I think there was a Jim Carrey movie like that too. Jim Carrey is in Fate! Dude, that's crazy. I'm pretty sure that was a city built from the ground up, not a oh my god, they're just talking about the Truman Show. Pretty sure that was a city built from the ground up, not a reproduction. That last scene was great, though. It was a good movie. Wasn't it? I want to teach my Liquid Mercury Mystic Code friend the greeting from it the next time I see her. Oh, that's... I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. Also, yeah, Flat is the one that taught the Liquid Mercury to be a maid. Save that talk for later. You won't be able to see that Mystic Code again if we don't get out of this world first. Sorry. Snapped back to reality by Jack, Flat dejectedly returned to the subject at hand. Since all the cars are stopped and the slot machines don't work, I think it might not be continuously mirroring the real city, but regularly singling out and copying worlds one moment at a time. There are parked cars here, so I guess objects whose position data is changing drastically in the isolated moment aren't reflected. I see. In that case, something is being done in the real-world suite that this magic circle corresponds to. Or could they be trying to open a way into this place? It didn't look like it from the way the magical energy was distorting until now, but that's just changed. How should I put it? It's like my phone suddenly got 3 bars even though we're in a subway tunnel, or... That's it, my phone! Flat hurriedly pulled out his cell phone and placed it on a nearby marble table and began to rummage through nearby objects. Let's see. I'll just borrow this, and this, and this. He was selecting several of the historical artifacts, apparently of Mesopotamian origin, with which the room was decorated, and filling them with his own magical energy, restoring their power as ritual tools. What do you intend to do? Well, some of the decorations look like they'd be useful as mystic codes, so I thought I'd set up a simple altar with them. Then, how should I put it? It's like knocking on a wall to get a response. If I'm lucky, I might be able to get my phone to connect to the outside. I see. No, wait, I said I see, but is that really possible? Don't worry, I've done similar things plenty of times. My classmate Callus and I used to convert between magical energy and radio waves all the time, so I think it'll work out. Flat was moving ahead with a carefree attitude. Jack was uneasy after his rough explanation, but he considered that Flat had accomplished several advanced feats of magecraft with the same approach and decided to wait and see. When my thoughts blended with Master's due to that caster's power, I somehow grasped the nature of his magecraft. It's similar to Eastern ideas. He doesn't limit his magecraft to a single system by defining the boundaries of his self, or rather, he can't. He constructs and performs most of his magecraft on the spot by sense alone. Even if you told him to construct some magecraft again, Flat would probably only make a rough estimation of it. He isn't molds breaking so much as he never had a mold to begin with. I'm astonished that mage Elmaloy II could raise an enfant terrible like him. As he watched Flat work, Jack thought that, given such an apprentice, a typical mage would either break in some way or else try to break Flat. He possessed a basic knowledge of magecraft thanks to traditions that Jack the Ripper was a mage, but even from that perspective, Even from the perspective of a unique servant who had been partially mixed with his master by Castor, that's fun to say, Flat was an anomaly. I know it's an odd question to ask who I don't even know, when I don't even know who I am myself, but just who is my erratic yet dependable master? In the background of that back and forth between master and servant, Hansa was surveying the city from the top floor. It looks just like an ordinary city from up here. Still, it looks like there's no question we really are in a closed-off world. When he stared into the distance from the top of the skyscraper, he could see something like a dense mist rising a considerable distance outside of the city. He doubted that the world continued beyond that mist. Recreating the entire world had to be beyond the realm of simple magecraft. Yeah, that'd be crazy if you could recreate the entire world. That'd be insane. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep that in the back of my thought. At this point, it'd be less a recreation of the world than a transportation to a parallel one. Not that the situation isn't crazy enough already. Hansa shrugged as he surveyed the quiet cityscape. One of the nuns approached him at a brisk walk. Hansa. What? There's something strange over there. Once Hansa turned to look in the direction that the nun unemotionally indicated, the other three nuns gathered to look down on the city from windows on the same side of the building. Has something happened? Father Hansa, there's been activity. Over there. Hansa looked where the polite nun with the eye patch initiated and saw what looked like a rising cloud of dust. That's... Lights and bursts of flame occasionally flashed inside the dust cloud. It looked a lot like the battle in front of the hospital that they had been able to see from the church the night before. Soon there was a particularly intense burst of light, and a gigantic form reared into view. Kerberos. We saw it yesterday, but was it always that big? The three-headed monster was larger than the average house. The sight of it made Hansa suspicious even before it put him on his guard. Is the archer wearing a cloth who used that thing here too? No. If it were, well, if he could make it that big, I'm guessing he would have done it last night. A number of theories raced through Hansa's head. I'm sure that demonic beast's body was left lying on the road. So was it pulled in like the rest of us? Did the servant who created this world give it strength? At the very least, the servant's probable master, Kura Okasubaki, would not know the kind of magecraft. That narrowed down the possibilities. It was either a servant, one of the people trying to exploit the situation in the city, or a dangerous being that just wanted to rampage regardless of the circumstances. What's the plan, Hansa? If we're going, I'm going to change my clothes. The blonde nun's question caused Hansa to reflect for a moment. I do not know each of their personalities, they're all getting the same sort of voice. Then, after looking at Flat and Jack behind him, he removed his own eye patch and said, No, this is our chance. We can observe the widest area from here. From beneath the eye patch appeared an artificial eye mystic code packed with a variety of mystic codes, biological, mechanical, and even electronic, inside mystically treated crystal. The lens inside the crystal rearranged themselves with a whirring sound like a robot in a sci-fi movie. Then, with vision enhanced to dozens of times that of a normal human, Hansa began to observe not the battle but the buildings around it. If a servant is using that thing, they may be nearby watching the fight. If I can at least find traces of magical energy. Well, at that point, Hansa stopped speaking. He spotted a small human figure standing atop a building a short distance away from that uproar. Is that... figure was familiar, rather. Hansa immediately fished where he had seen it before out of the sea of his memories. In the hallway of the hotel he had leapt into in pursuit of a hematophage after the incident at the police station. That was where he had been. It was the boy who was supposed to have been attacked in passing by that monster. The hematophage, Jester Karchur. He got me. The corners of Hansa's mouth curled upward, even as he followed the figure with an angry glare. If he had been using a type of far-seeing magecraft that operated directly on the target's space, the figure would have noticed that he was watching. At present, however, Hansa was only using his artificial eye to directly enhance his vision. In a sense, it was like looking through binoculars, as he observed the boy-shaped thing happily watching the conflict in the city. He could not tell whether it was controlling the giant beast, but he was certain, at least, that the hematophage was involved in the current situation. A transformation ability. Must be pretty impressive to even turn his presence completely human. Not only Hansa, but most executors could only see through transformations and disguises that relied on ordinary magecraft or hematophage peculiarities. But at the sight of the transformation, which was almost like the creature had swapped out its very soul, reconfirmed for Hansa that Jester was an enemy that could not be afforded to be underestimated. Change gear. We're going to slay that hematophage while we're in here. That child is the hematophage from before? Didn't he just keep it under his control? The nuns sounded skeptical about their orders, but Hansa gave a little shake of his head, all the while glaring at the look on the distant boy's face. He may be able to change the color of his soul, but he can't change that twisted smile. Just then a cheerful voice rang out from behind. I got through! Hans and the others turned to find Flat grinning from ear to ear and dancing for joy in front of the bizarre altar that he had constructed with his phone in one hand. The signal from Flat's cell phone and the magical energy he had used to transmit it had been connected to the outside world, the real snowfield. In other words, a hole had been made in the walls of the ward for the magical energy and signal to pass through, even if it were a small one. For Flat and the others, it was only a stepping stone on their way to the outside. But the small change caused big changes in the world of Snowfield. It was like a single ant in a massive den. In a sense, you could say that this minor change was the trigger that ended the deadlock between factions vying for control of Snowfield, although no one would knew it at the time. But whether anyone knew it or not, the city's fate began inexorably to change, as if to show that when cracks had begun to spread, they would eventually bring everything crumbling down. Every now and then there's a weird typo. In the sky above Snowfield, the airborne workshop found it high above the real city. Inside a massive, who said that? Oh, well. Inside a massive airship floating so far above the earth it could not even be reproduced inside the ward, Francesca grinned ecstatically as she whispered, Yay, there's finally a hole. I don't know who did it, but I want to give them a Nobel Prize or something. The Nobel Me Prize. The what? Francesca flapped her legs on the bed as she cheerfully answered her own shadow caster. I'll give them money from a Nobel Prize to whoever helped me out. I'm sure they'll be happy to get it, but I'm sure I'll be happy since I won't have to pay out of pocket. The people of the Nobel Foundation would lose out, but there are two sides to that benefit, so in terms of plus and minuses, it works out to a positive. That's how the world becomes a nicer place. No, I was wondering what a Nobel Prize is. Huh? Don't you get that kind of information from the Grail? Well, it's clearly unrelated to the Grail War. Of course, it's case by case, so I don't know how it would work in a proper Holy Grail War. Francesca turned to look with interest at the boy Prelati, who was stuffing his face with expensive chocolate truffles. That makes you wonder, huh? How much do you think the people in Fuyuki know? They were active in Japan, so I'm guessing they at least got its political system and laws in their heads. Hey, do you know who the current US president is? No. But I do know I do kind of know what the presidency is. I know how TV works too, so I can use a cell phone no problem. I don't know any of the names of phone brands though. I see. I wonder if the other heroic spirits are the same way. You're me, so you might have connection to my knowledge when we made a contract and established a magical energy connection. Does that matter? Whatever I started out knowing, I could just pick up any cards I need later. And betting the farm on my current hand and going down in flames would be pretty fun too. Don't you think? Prelati slumped against Francesca's back and softly brushed her lips with a fingertip covered in melted chocolate. Oh my goodness. Francesca grinned, ran her tongue coquettishly over the finger. Dude, I cannot believe we got finger licking back. And like self-cessed finger licking. Then flashed a malicious smile and leaned her head against Prelati's cheek. Yes, it's no use trying to corrupt yourself, you know. I'm already corrupted. Are you sure you're not the one trying to tempt me? Am I right in thinking that this qualifies as narcissism? I wonder. I'd love to summon Narcissus and ask him. Not that I have a catalyst that eccentric, of course. Francesca, oh my god, dude. Could you imagine? Dude, a Narcissus, like, servant would be crazy. What class would he even be? Francesca tried to change the subject with a few offhand remarks about the Greek boy who lent his name to narcissism, but Prelati, her own shadow, was undeterred and turned the conversation back to its original subject. But you are working to make the world a more fun place, right? Well, only by leaving things to others and cutting as many corners as I can. I can't wait. How much do you think we'll be able to lay the world bare once we let the Grail take care of that great labyrinth? It's risky to even look for the labyrinth. Wait, with the entrance, wait, what? And get our hands on the microcosm of the world in its depths? What are you talking about? Wait, I know what we're talking about! They're talking about Calbec Alcatraz's labyrinth and the microcosm of the world. I think that's friggin' what's her face from what? Oh my god, dude! It's a real good thing that I read Maho Sukai no Hako. Whoa, dude! What do you mean it's as related to that? This is insane. Okay, if you're confused by this, go watch my reading of Maho Sakai no Hako. Okay. Yep, they're talking about Calbec Alcatraz's labyrinth, and the microcosm of the world is his granddaughter. Yep. So, wow, okay. Wow. Are you kidding me? Well, first things first. The door to this city's little labyrinth, a weird world made by a weird servant, just turned up. Giggling, Francesca traced lines in the air with her fingers and caused several floating mirrors to rise. Out of the group trapped inside, I'm most interested in the Lionheart, I guess, although it really is a mystery why that fanboy turned up instead of Arturia, little Arturia. Francesca, who like the police force was already certain of Saber's identity, stared at his image in one of the mirrors, which showed him delivering a speech from atop the police car as she licked her lips. Yes, he's wonderful. A real kingly king who's lit by the legend of the past and magnifies your light to shine several times as bright. Are your guts aching? Prelati leered and Francesca smiled innocently back. Of course! That Saber's been giving me butterflies this whole time. I can't help becoming a fan. Not quite as strong as with Jean or Gilles, but really close. Does that make sense to you? Of course it does. Francesca gestured animatedly as she spoke, like a low-teen girl talking about her favorite pop star. Prelati watched her and continued calmly. Yes, it does. You're me after all. That's why I know just what you want to do with that oh-so-wonderful king you become a fan of. Will you come with me? I can't cast illusions as well as you can right now. Sure I will. Should we do it inside the ward? Yeah. Faldius will never shut up if we do it here. The boy and girl chatted conspiratorially. Outwardly, they appeared to be young humans, but writhing within those vessels were inside so utterly dark they could only be called monsters. Reflected in the mirrors that hovered around them were records of the past, vestiges as images which were factual but did not reflect the truth. While she wondered what truth she should add to them to thrust on the Lionheart, Francesca gazed absent-mindedly at an image of more than 10 years earlier. An image of a holy sword wielder clad in blue cloth and silver armor, who had once overcome everything and yet lost everything. God, this chapter is crazy. In a dream. The city was kind of noisy. The wind was kind of humid. Kura Okusubaki was still too young to be able to put her apprehension into words. By all rights, she should not have been able to sense the change, but thanks to her magic circuits and the influence of Pale Rider linked to the magic circuits they generated, changes in the world around her and the heroic spirits, who was its ruler, echoed vividly within her. The girl sensed it in the midst of an afternoon nap. She lay on the family sofa, in a dream within a dream, a troubled sleep that was hers alone. I'm scared, Daddy. I'm scared, Mommy. I don't really understand, but I think something scary is coming. Girl. Where did Mr. Black go? Chester hasn't come to play today either. Is everyone gonna go away again? Girl. Will I be alone again? 'Cause I can't do it right? Is everyone gonna be mad at me again? Can you hear me? How can I do a good job? Daddy and Mommy are smiling at me. Oh, this is Zheng. Can't you hear me? Zheng noticed immediately. But perhaps humans change in 2,000 years. What can I do so that they'll keep smiling forever and ever? Will they stay with me? Perhaps you don't understand my language. I'm scared. I'm scared. Hello, girl. Zhao Shanghou nu hai. Ohio. Musume-san. Bonjour. I'm not even gonna try. I mean, that looks what, Thai? Chao Bio Sang. I don't know. Are you okay? What is okay? I'm a fool. There's a limit to the languages I can learn from the documents in this room. This is my only chance now that he's distracted, but... Who's there? Mr. Black? You noticed me. Thank you, young lady. The girl awoke from her nap. Having woken up in the dream world, she stared around her from the fake sofa in the fake house, but there was no one to be seen. She could see her mother and father talking in the garden, but there was no sign of anyone else, and she could not see Mr. Black anywhere. Despite her youth, the girl felt that she must have been dreaming and was about to go running to her parents to relieve her unease when, hello, girl who wanders in dreams. An audible voice brought Tsubaki to a halt. Have no fear. I will not harm you, nor will I be angry with you. The voice of someone she could not see. An ordinary girl in her situation might have easily wailed in terror, but Tsubaki was strangely unafraid of the voice. Just like when she had first met Mr. Black, she was strangely certain that the voice was on her side. With Mr. Black, Pale Rider, her dormant mage instincts had told her that the heroic spirit was a connected part of her. This time, something like warmth that she sensed from the voice itself caused Tsubaki's human instincts to accept its owner as something she could be safe with. Who are you? I'm Kuraoka Tsubaki, Tsubaki asked, just as she had when she first met Pale Rider, and the being with the beautiful androgynous voice quietly explained itself. Thank you, girl. I have no name. I had one long ago, but I lost it. Tsubaki looked confused, not understanding what the words meant. The owner of the voice calmly told her about herself. I am what was once called a deity in a certain place. Now, however, I'm merely a remnant, leftover, if you will. Oh god, oh wow, okay. I thought there'd be more than that. Well, hot dang, that was a long chapter. That was honestly, that was a really long chapter, and a lovely mix of old and new. Right? We had a lot of old stuff from the anime, but also a lot of really good new stuff that keeps my interest. So I'll say this, boy, I'm still able to enjoy this even having watched the anime. So I'm looking forward to reading some more and getting to fully new territory as we get through probably till the end of this novel, I bet. I think the end of the anime is the end of this novel, but there's going to be other new stuff kind of sprinkled in. So looking forward to that. Thank you guys, and we will be moving on with the next interlude. A mercenary is a free man next time. What page are we on? We're on page... We're okay. This is page 99 of 217. So we're we're roughly halfway through. Roughly, all things considered. So thank you all for watching, guys. We'll see you then. Ciao. Yo.